Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Michelle Aubin and Linda Lang.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. I'm Michelle Aubin here with my co-host, Linda Lang. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Michelle. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Pleasure as well. And so today we're going to talk about why it is sometimes difficult to make a positive change in life. And so often people have an idea that they're going to make an improvement in maybe the way they eat or exercise or some other habit, ending procrastination, whatever it might be. And it's almost a universal experience that at some point people have difficulty maintaining that change. And so today we're just going to explore why that is. We're going to dive right in. So I have a few thoughts about that, Linda, but I'm going to bounce it off of you and see if you have any ideas.
Well, there's quite a few reasons why people can get stuck in creating the change that they want in their life. Part of it can be habits and patterns and identifying with issues, but there's something called fragmented parts that can be created when we experience trauma. And it actually doesn't even have to be trauma. For instance, for some people, their very first day of school being separated from their mom could be a trauma for them. So it doesn't have to be something horrendous, but there are all these little experiences in life that can create some internal challenges for us. And when we do have parts and they're not on board with the change that we want to make, it can definitely create some resistance for us. Michelle, you know what I mean by a part, correct?
I do, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit because people hearing this might not have heard of this idea before, and we're not talking about multiple personalities or anything like that. We're talking about a very common situation, so it doesn't even mean an illness. Let's kind of clear that up. But this idea that there might be a part of us that wants to keep us safe and therefore doesn't want us to be in situations where we might become mocked or made fun of. Like you mentioned, school experiences. Many of us as children had those kind of experiences, so that there might be a part that emerges that says, well, I'm never going to speak up again in that way because it's too risky. And it can be an unconscious development of this part of us that wants to keep us safe so we don't get mocked. And that's just a very concrete example.
And it almost has a persona of itself, correct?
Yes, and then what happens, let's say we become adults, we develop businesses where we need to make presentations, or we have a job where we need to meet people and get outside of our comfort zone. That part that was formed in our youth that we aren't even aware was formed to keep us safe from emotional trauma will emerge and say, well, no, we're not going to be doing those things, public speaking, or any of these things where we get outside of our comfort zone. And that part of us will sometimes show up as procrastination or avoiding making phone calls that we need to make to reach out to people. So that's one of the ways I think of parts. How do you think of that, Linda? Does that resonate with?
Absolutely. I think it's a pretty big topic because in severe cases, it can actually probably turn into a multiple personality disorder. But that's definitely not what we're talking about here. I actually think that probably for those people that are aware of inner child work, that's
Right.
probably a good example of working with those parts of us that still need love or nurturing, or to feel safe, to have purpose. Working with that, little girl or that little boy that is a
Yeah.
part of our personality that, wants to go and play and have fun and be loved and explore.
I like that you bring that up. That's a great concept. So when we are adults and we're saying, well, how come I keep hitting this wall? How come I keep doing these things and I reach a limit, and then I like take one step forward and two steps back. That's the phrase a lot of people use, or that idea. It might even show up as like with weight loss or exercise. How come I start this project and it doesn't last very long? And this idea of healing whatever part of us that is trying to keep us safe, or that wants to play, wants to be loved. The concept is it's a very common one. But it may show up differently for each person. So each person's inner child will have different needs. But usually it's for safety, love, play, fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the kind of interesting thing about parts is they're in our unconscious. So you can think of, your conscious of awareness. And then in your unconscious, there's just like soup of all these different roles you've played and experiences you've had and emotions you're still holding on to, memories, all kinds of things. And when something in your current life is reminiscent of something in the past that one of these parts has an active role in, that part of you can actually come forward and you can respond from the place of that part. And when that happens afterwards, you're like, I said that, I didn't say
Mhm.
that, or what did I say that for? Why did I react like that? I think almost universally, if a person is like really overreacting to the circumstances that are at hand, becoming, overly emotional, overly angry, or fearful or sad, chances are there is a part of them in their psyche that's holding on to some kind of pain or some memory that's being triggered, so that they're actually reacting from that place in the past of that younger
Mhm.
expression of themselves. And so one of the reasons why we would want to heal that is so that, first of all, we have more choice, and that we have more wholeness, more unity in our consciousness. And once we do kind of align all of our parts and have them integrated, we can change so much faster.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I would also say we could change easier. And so I have a little story. Recently, I was working with a client who was trying to make some changes in her life and was feeling like she wasn't doing enough, and that she should kind of stack the effort. And I proposed an idea of a play day, or a play hour, before doing the responsible adult thing that she's trying to move forward in. And she just reported to me this weekend about it and had a breakthrough. So she had this play day doing something fun, enjoyable, a hobby that she loves. And the rest was easy. So sometimes this can show up, we call it resistance, but that's kind of a loaded word. But when we feel stuck and we say, well, I should be able to do this and that and this and that, well, maybe there's a part of us that needs to be honored, of more play. And our culture is so driven, and we all have this kind of internalized, I shouldn't say we all, many of us have this like kind of internalized idea of pushing through. Sometimes we take a step back and relax and play a little more. The rest is easier. And so this was a very insightful thing with my client.
Yeah, I would say it's always good to honor all parts
Yeah.
of you, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're talking, let's say, about diet and changing our diet, I would not recommend like honoring the inner child by having candy, right? Because that's going to sabotage. But maybe there's a way to say, what do I need? It could be an activity, and to meet the needs of that inner child.
You could probably honor that inner child more by listening to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the thing I would want to say about this is that when we become aware of these parts, it's not that we're trying to get rid of them or they're
No.
bad. Even if they're shadow parts, they are created for a reason. So if we can bring healing to that part and then really bring them more into wholeness with who we are, it's a healthier way, and you'll have more cooperation because there isn't a part inside you that wants to be annihilated. If it thinks you're out to get it, you're not going to be able to work with it.
So let's talk about shadow parts and what that means, and if there are parts that are not shadow parts. That idea may not be familiar to people. So um, I'll dive into that, and then maybe you can add to what I'm saying. When we develop these parts, sometimes the part could be an overachiever, which is actually a shadow as well. But that might be the part that works really hard, and if you have that aspect, then that's a part that can get rewarded in our culture, right? That can be a part that knows how to function very well and knows how to kick into gear and study hard and do all of that, as opposed to a part that might say, well, I don't feel like doing that. I just feel like playing video games, or I just feel like kicking back. And so both parts, I would say, have been created for a purpose, like you said, Linda, and possibly both are also shadow. But is it possible to have a part in us that was created that is something other than shadow? And what is a shadow part?
Well, I look at a shadow part as being something that we're not conscious of, so that we're
Okay.
reacting from an unconscious influence.
Okay.
So if there's a part of you that knows you're an overachiever and a part of you that also wants to play, you have a little bit more conscious awareness. So I would liken it more from my perspective. Anyways, my explanation of it would be when you react to something, or when maybe you have a mischievous or nasty even kind of persona that comes through sometimes, that somebody could say something and then all of a sudden you just, a sharp tongue comes out and cuts that person to threads, or does something on purpose to create a reaction in that person, even though it's not a conscious thing, that you don't want to create stress or distress in another person. And yet there is this part of you that comes out that might trigger a reaction in that other person. And afterwards, again, you're thinking, wow, every time I do that, they, why do I keep doing the same old thing over and over again? So I look at that as being a little bit more like a shadow, because it's something, it's not necessarily a behavior that we want to have, that we want to even acknowledge that we have. You know, maybe it's lying, cheating, or stealing, or, you know, something that we would deem as bad. But there's a reason that that part of us takes on those behaviors. It's lacking something or needing something, that it's not being fulfilled, and that is a part of us at some level, until we heal that part, and then we no longer react in those ways. Did I explain that okay, Michelle?
Yeah, I just want to tease out the concept of shadow part. So shadow is something in us that we don't want to accept. Would you say that? If I'm pushing someone's buttons just to get a rise, and I don't want to see myself as that kind of person, that might be shadow. So then I don't understand why I'm doing it, and I see myself doing it.
Yeah, that's another way of saying it. Maybe would be, you know, it's so much easier for us to look at our light sometimes than to actually acknowledge that, you know, we're not always perfect, we're not always compassionate, we're not always super spiritual, or whatever it is that we think we are in our light. Okay.
Well, my concept of spiritual has actually evolved to include accepting all parts of myself. And this idea that one part is spiritual and another part isn't, I don't have that idea anymore. So, and
Exactly.
I credit that, I want to give credit to Matt Kahn. And I think you're familiar with Matt Kahn. Have you? He talks about
Yeah.
love whatever
Okay.
arises. So anyone hearing this who is working through any of this in your life, I found that concept to be really helpful. Whatever I see coming up in my life, any challenge within myself, to love it, to not judge it. And that to me was like the first step in healing, and a very powerful one. Love whatever arises. So the part of me that's frustrated, the part of me that's judging people, the part of me that judges myself, the part of me that, whatever it might be, anger, whatever I used to judge, now it's a um, reason to accept myself or love myself. Which doesn't mean I have to keep accepting that activity if I want to change it, but judging keeps things in shadow, because we project them away from, we separate them from ourselves, right? Am I explaining that clearly?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you made a really, really good point, because we are spiritual beings, all parts of us. And it's not about a good part and a bad part.
Right.
And it's really just a deeper level of self-acceptance and self-awareness and knowing the self, and really loving oneself unconditionally, and healing all those aspects that might have a tendency to express themselves in a more negative expression, that once we bring healing to them, they can express more love and more divinity in our everyday lives.
And I know for me, going through that process, it freed up a lot of energy when we stop judging ourselves. There's a lot of friction that comes with judging. When we stop judging and we just observe what is and make choices from that place, that frees up just so much energy and tension and all of that. So it's healing in and of itself. So, yeah.
And the kind of crazy thing is when we're really hard on ourselves and we judge ourselves so harshly and we're so critical, we are creating more of that negativity in our consciousness, and in our experience will attract more of all those things that we judge. So it's important to do our inner work so we can get to that place of, self-forgiveness if we need self-forgiveness, self-love, self-acceptance, and just really knowing oneself.
So that's a great place to end today's episode, and we would love to hear from you in the comments what you thought of this topic, anything you have to add or share. We love your comments and look forward to that from you. So we will see you next time. And final words, Linda, anything you want to add to wrap up?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye for now.